Pathfinder has been in Tanzania for over 50 years, but we've been doing community-based health work, and Wolfie is aware of our work, I think, right from the onset, since 1984. Initially focused on family planning, but then we've expanded to the full range of reproductive health programs across Tanzania. And our claim to fame in Tanzania is we're the people who get services down to the community level. And as a result, through different programs that we have over 3,500 community health workers, volunteer community health workers, who are spread across about half of the country. And that's who we're working with, just to give you context. And most of them are, almost all of them have initially been trained to provide home-based care for people living with HIV. And that program has been shifting tremendously over the last 10 years, shifting from very much focused on dignified care for the dying to now looking at, okay, people are on treatment, how do you keep them alive, how do you link them to all kinds of services, how do you keep them engaged in economic activities, and how do you deepen your program, how do you make sure that they're actually adhering to treatment. So that's been the genesis of our program. And then on top of that, we've layered a whole bunch of other activities in different regions. So not all activities coincide in all the programs, but many of the same providers have also been trained to offer community-based family planning services. In Dar es Salaam, because of the interaction between TB and HIV, we're introducing a community-based TB DOTS program in the main city, and then we're also introducing activities to address gender-based violence, and we're looking into mobile technologies on all these different issues that we're working with. So introducing a screening tool for GBV, which we're just going to be talking about very initially, and then for home-based care, making sure that our providers are following key protocols for every visit that they go into. One of the difficulties you have when you work outside a clinical setting is how do you monitor when you're not there that someone actually provided all the key care components in every visit that they provide to the home-based care client. They have a book that they're filling out. There's a government, Marion was telling me a little bit about all the different projects you're working into. You're familiar, many of you are familiar with government HMIS, HMIS forms and the registers. I don't know how they scan those registers to send them to you, because many of them are literally yay big. Okay, we have to have special orders to get the registers to work. And so we try to work with those registers, but the registers are always filled after the fact. There's no home-based care provider who is reasonable will carry the register into a home and start filling out this giant book. So we've tried to integrate that into a mobile phone, into a mobile tool, which was the first application of ComCare outside of, I believe that was done in South Africa a little bit, and then, but taken to scale in Tanzania. And ComCare has moved on to do many different things, and we've now also are working with FHI and D3 to introduce a family planning tool and a family planning screening tool, so that when our providers go out to provide family planning services, they can also use the ComCare tool to do two things. One is to make sure that they're providing counseling using the decision trees that are available, but also Population Council developed a tool that was developed for a clinical setting called Balanced Counseling Strategy Plus. That allows you, when you're doing family planning, counseling, you want to make sure that the person you're counseling is being given all the choices, method choices possible, and then they're making an informed choice about which method they want to be on. But you can actually eliminate a lot of the methods by just a few questions about whether that person is interested in a shorter acting method or a long acting method. And you don't have to then go into all the different methods. You're still making sure they have informed choice, but you're doing a lot of you're skipping a lot of the protocol that you need. My understanding again is you've been working on skip questions and how to do the programming around skipping. So that's what we're trying to program in, and we've lost John.
Go ahead.
All right. So that's just to give you a background on all the different mHealth kind of work that we're doing. We're working on a TB application. We're working on we have a home-based care application. Our family planning application is almost ready. And then in the next year, we're looking at, in the next 12 months, we're looking at integrating a gender-based violence screening tool. Tanzania, the State Department has invested $24 million in Tanzania to really have a massive, to make a national difference in addressing gender-based violence. You may think this is why Tanzania, and one of the reasons is in our last demographic health survey, a very high number of women reported having experienced some form of violence by the age of 30. And for many of them, about a third of the women reported that their first experience of sex was a violent experience. So it was, I think everyone got very, very shocked about what the statistics were looking like. And we then say, no, we need to have a national response, and the State Department responded really well, and they've put in more money than has ever been invested in addressing GBV before in any country. Since then, Mozambique and DRC have also received funding at similar levels to address GBV as well. But then how do you equip a community health worker who's only got a primary school education to actually do screening for gender-based violence? And again, this is where mobile technologies can help them to go through key protocols to say, okay, am I at least screening enough so that if the woman is referral, that she's getting the referrals that she needs. So, layering on top of all of this, this was something that we began, I'm trying to remember, and Marion, you can help me as well. I think we started 2008.
Yeah, John may remember, because John worked on this.
Yeah, John, you worked on this. This was before I got to Tanzania.
Yes.
Yeah, that was it was quite some time ago. But I wanted to provide you with this context so that you have an idea of what all the different mobile phone applications have been. Now, since then, we've also been experiencing an operational issue. How do you, all of these people are volunteers, but in order to get their monthly reports and in order to keep them motivated, we do provide a small cash allowance on a monthly basis. Now try to imagine being in 10 different regions that are about 800 miles apart. In 10 different regions, 47 districts, 3,500 community health workers, and you have to get money out to them every month in a safe way, trying to make sure your staff are safe, trying to make sure that you actually have some evidence that that money is actually reaching the intended person, that somebody's not using their left hand and many variations of their right hand to sign for the money, and then the money is just disappearing. How do you make it accountable? Because all these things happen. This kind of fraud is very, very common across all our platforms. But the main issue is how do you get the money, and how do you get it quickly? How do you make sure that the money reaches the intended people on time, because they've actually been providing a really critical service in the communities that they're working in. So we were exploring that, and M-Pesa was gradually taking off in Tanzania. Mobile money systems, forgive me if I'm repeating things that you already know, but mobile money systems were introduced heavily in Kenya first, and that's where M-Pesa really took off with Safaricom. And then Tanzania has been the second country in Sub-Saharan Africa where it's been introduced. But
How many people know about M-Pesa, or have heard about M-Pesa?
Okay. So, I tried to check in. I wish I could have done an M-Pesa transaction using my phone, but I can. Basically, it's a way of transferring money from a phone to, from one phone to another phone, or from a server to a phone, to a client wherever they are.
John has a question.
My hand is up.
Go ahead, John.
All right, go ahead, John.
Because I've heard about it.
Oh, because he's heard about M-Pesa.
So you can use M-Pesa. We can now use M-Pesa, and this is more recent stuff. But if I want to pay my electricity bill, I can use M-Pesa. If I want to pay for my water, if I want to pay for gas at the gas station, so it's similar to a credit card, but in a credit card-less society, M-Pesa is a better alternative. It also offers an opportunity for people to save, and that's something we're exploring. We and many other nonprofits are exploring, because M-Pesa's mobile money systems have actually expanded in sub-Saharan Africa with significant investment by the Gates Foundation. Okay, so the Gates Foundation invested in Safaricom for M-Pesa to take off outside of Nairobi, and then they put in $7 million in Tanzania to cover the risk for Vodacom to take it on in Tanzania, saying, we'll help you expand, let's get the platform out there, and then if it works really well and you're making a profit, return our money back to us. If it's not, then proof of concept, it was worth the risk to put it out.
Yeah. And just to kind of add to that a little bit, in Haiti, USAID dumped $10 million into their mobile money service after the earthquake for improved development and economic livelihood. And so any projects that we just even put in any projects that happen there have to use mobile money because it's reaching the unbanked. So I think a lot of donors.
Right. So you have all these issues.
I do have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
I think that's a really interesting point about mobile money expanding into a new market and about the size of the market and the cost of entry into that market. We're looking at that right now in Nigeria, about using mobile money here, and there is this idea that network effect is going to be really important. Perhaps I can bring up the question again towards the end, but I'd be curious to see, how would you apply some of the things you've learned in Tanzania, like Nigeria, and what kind of cost would you expect, would the larger community expect to have in a place like this?
That's a great question, John, and I'm not sure we have an easy answer. I think it does take time, and one of the things I was going to emphasize was it took 3 years for Vodacom to go from 0 to the first 1 million users signed up for M-Pesa. And then all of a sudden they hit the takeoff point, which they weren't anticipating. So then this was from 2009 to 2012, they were working on getting M-Pesa out there, and we were hearing about M-Pesa, but not many of us were using it. Then from January 2012 to June 2012, they went from 1 million to 3 million users signed up. And then from June to December, they went from 3 million to 4.8 million. It's completely stressed their systems out. We're in constant negotiation with them about what we expect their systems to do for us. And they're trying to manage their systems well as well. But it takes time. It takes a lot of investment. And they actually started doing this without the Gates Foundation. And I think the critical point was Gates putting in money, saying, we've got to get you out there, we've got to talk to the businesses, we've got to bring you, here's the technical assistance you need to get everybody going. Now keep in mind that for Tanzania, and this is different about takeoff points for Kenya, and I don't know enough about credit markets in Nigeria, is there were no ATMs in Tanzania 7 years ago. I mean, there were a few, but most of the time you go to Tanzania, we'll see how many times did you come to Tanzania between the 80s and now, and it takes, you get there, and if you're not carrying a big wad of cash around, you're not legit. So here you are taking a society, I mean, and you're taking, and your pockets are full of cash, because the largest note is $6. So you end up having pretty big, pockets full of a lot of money. And so you have a society that's not used to the idea of, I mean, think about it. It's intangible money. And you're then trying to get them on board on trusting that this money, this little text message that you get on your phone is real. And that you don't need to necessarily cash that money in that's entered your phone system, but that then you can use it to have a transaction with somebody and send them their money and keep moving it around. That's a really difficult concept because money is tangible, and you actually have a sense of what I'm getting in exchange for. But this one, you have to trust this digital message that comes into your phone. So those were the issues we're struggling with, and I think the takeoff point came when there were enough people using phones and managing phones and word of mouth, plus a lot of advertising, and enough merchants who had signed up for the system so that people could see how they could use the money that they were receiving. So it's in this context that we come in, and then one additional point that you need, which is hard to often get skipped out in a case study, is we, Pathfinder as an organization, ended up with a CFO who said, I do not want to see cash transactions in your offices across the board. So all of us got our marching orders by the Chief Finance Officer saying, figure it out, I don't want Pathfinder staff handling cash. One of the measures in our office became how many physical handwritten checks do we write a month? How many times are you going out into a community to either pay the community health workers, or if you're doing a training, paying the per diems, or paying the vendor for the food, paying for the whole with cash. And every time, every month we reported back to headquarters and we had to explain to them, has this work been done, or how far have we gone on getting it done? And I think it's easy to dismiss that saying, oh, we would have gone to M-Pesa anyway. I think we would have did it. And so come December, I think come September of 2011, we finally said, okay, we're going to start M-Pesa and we're going to start in Dar es Salaam, because that was where our headquarters are. That's where we have 500 of the 3,500 community health workers, and we would learn rollout. And rollout was an absolute disaster. Okay. Providers were up in arms. They said, where's my money? Where do we see it? Why didn't we receive this money? We had meetings and we'd done everything that we thought needed to be done to prepare them, saying we're moving you to it. But we realized that many people were just this was before that major takeoff point had occurred, so they were really unfamiliar with the system. And there was this issue of trust, and is this real money or not? So with Vodafone, we really worked hard with Vodacom to say, okay, how do we sort this out? And gradually we got people on board, but it took 6 months of experimenting in Dar es Salaam before it got it right. And all kinds of issues emerged, which I think are relevant even for the kind of applications that you're doing. People forgot, people like their messages so much. Getting a message on a phone is so exciting that they forgot to delete them, and their memory cards were full. Okay, people don't have, they have phones that cost $12. So these are not phones with a 2 gig micro SD card. These are phones with a tiny amount of memory. It fills up pretty quickly with text messages. And so there was no room for them to receive the text message that said, you've received your money. Some people forgot to turn their phones on during the time period that we told them, please make sure your phones are on, because if it's off, the message only goes out once. It doesn't there is no way for Vodacom to know, they still don't, that the message will be received, that somebody didn't receive their message and I need to send them the message back again. So these were some of the issues that we really struggled with at the beginning. It's turned into a fine machine where lots of information goes out before a payment comes out. So that's just to give you a quick background. Now, how much money are we moving between June 2012 and December 2012? We moved over $1 million in M-Pesa. Pathfinder is now the second largest corporate client for M-Pesa in Tanzania. Okay, and we've just moved into a cashless system, so every payment wherever we are, we're making with M-Pesa. It's an exciting time for us. Vodacom is investing in a major 3G network in Tanzania, but their choices of where they're putting their towers up, because they're quadrupling their number of towers, is where we are providing M-Pesa services. Because we've taken them into really rural communities where they hadn't reached before, and they're seeing what the uptake is like, and they're getting really excited about it. Do we have problems with it? Absolutely. I mean, we've had some nightmare issues with M-Pesa, and some of them I can relate to. How many of you are, before I kind of bring you up to the screen, which I'll have to re-log into, how many of you are familiar with electronic banking? I imagine most of you are doing banking through your phones or through, right? Okay, so M-Pesa is very similar to it. But I just found out a month ago, talking to some people from the Gates Foundation Financial Services for the Poor People, that Vodacom, interestingly, and Safaricom never went to the banking industry to set up their platform. So this has been designed by people who've never worked in the banking sector. Okay? And it's led to all kinds of issues for us. There are weeks when we were doing some very intense training of most of our 3,500 community health workers around September of last year. And during a week, there were weeks when we were moving about $100,000, $150,000. You need a lot of checks and balances to make sure the money is moving right. This system doesn't allow us many checks and balances. So if you go into a corporate electronic banking system, they actually have lots of checks and balances. The person who's inputting the data is not the person who's approving the transaction, who's clearing the transaction from the financial side, and that's not the person who's then actually doing the approvals. It's like having the signatories on your checks, and who are the signatories on the checks. In this system, the person who inputs can also approve. They can't release the payment, but they can approve, and only one other person needs to release. So you need collusion between only two people, and the money's up. So just to give you an idea that these are still things we're struggling with, and we're having constant conversations with Vodacom saying, we need more safety. We need a lot more safety, otherwise a huge amount of our money could disappear, and then we'll have to work on it. Just to give you an idea, I can only log in. There is some safety built in. I can't log in to initiate a transaction. So I just don't have the authorization to initiate a transaction. I can only make the payment. I can only authorize the payment. So this is using my login. And what I would do normally is go to the screen, go to bulk transactions, because usually we're paying people in bulk. And I would look at what the recent requests are. Now, since I was out of the system for a while, I need to log back in again. I got that right? Yeah. So I'll go in here, and that will tell me what our financial situation is in general, or what key transactions are that have been uploaded into the system.
Does everybody kind of understand how it works?
Did I explain enough of how it, so the way it works, let's give you a very practical example. Let's say we're doing a training workshop in somewhere in Arusha. We have staff who are out there who are doing the training. You come in, and usually you have a sign-up sheet, you sign up, and instead of just having your name and your affiliation, we actually ask you to say, all right, please provide a phone number to which we'll be sending you the money. That information is then loaded into an Excel file, and it's sent to us via internet. It is reliant on internet services being available. So wherever our staff are, they send us the information via internet to our Dar es Salaam main office. And at the Dar es Salaam main office, they actually upload that information and send it. They upload it, and you have to so talking about unfriendly stuff, you actually have to redo the file into a CSV file in Excel. Okay, so it's very simplified. All text is removed. All numbers, if there are gaps between numbers, you have to remove all the gaps. You have to do a lot of massaging before the file is ready. That's why we think, the software developers who did this from a techie point of view, not from a user point of view. So it's very, very user unfriendly at this stage. We upload that file. We learned over time that if you uploaded a file with more than 50 people being paid using one file, then most of your transactions will fail. We were wondering why there were so many transaction failures and why we had to reload the same transactions over and over and over again. And then it took 6 months for Vodacom to tell us, guys, You were supposed to only load maximum 50 people at a time. And the amount of wasted time that goes into not knowing. So this is what was loaded today, between today, and I can just come in and change the dates here and take a look at okay, what happened from the 12th of April to the 25th of April, and I press go. This is good for me because I've been gone from the office this time. Let me see how many transactions have been kicking in. Probably not many. Anyway, it's pretty slow, and then individual transactions come up. Now, how do we as approvers get informed? We get a voucher that says please pay. Often there's very small amount of time, so you can see how many transactions just occurred, and each one may have up to 50 payments. So it just gives you a sense of, and that's a slow week for us. Okay, so these are all, and you can tell, you can see what happens. Is Janice uploaded? And actually it's not telling me who signed off. Because Janice is our M-Pesa accountant. He uploads, and I can see, oh, Mustafa approved this particular payment. Jane approved this payment, and this one was canceled. That's why only Janice was handling that particular statement. And each one of those may have as many as 50 payments and of different variations, denominations.
I just have a really general question. So this money, can you only use it for mobile phone purposes?
No.
Or can you can go to a bank
So you can
and
go-
also withdraw actual
Okay, that's a great question. So the other part of the system that has to be created is Vodacom sets up a huge number of agents where you can go in, and these agents, you can be just a little kiosk, a little shop that's selling lots of other stuff, and they put up a big sign saying M-Pesa Wakala. Wakala means agent in Swahili. And so you go to the Wakala and you show them your phone. They'll ask you to punch in your code, your secret PIN number. You punch in your PIN number. It tells you how much the money is. And with our payments, it's a very specific message. This money is coming to you from Pathfinder. Pathfinder is absorbing all the costs for the vendor as well as, because you pay two sets of costs. One is for the payment and for receiving the money. Now, we don't want to make it difficult for our providers, so the message makes it very clear that Pathfinder's covered all the costs. And please give this person 20,000 shillings or 80,000 shillings. So talk about another problem. We've done workshops in really remote locations which just don't have the cash flow for the agents to have enough cash in hand to make the payment. So you have to make sure you've informed them well in advance, Vodacom and all the agents around, that can you please make sure you've given them a line of credit and enough money so that when these people show up, they actually have the money to pay. Now what we're trying to get to is avoid even that by then having a phone-to-phone payment system, because the ultimate goal Gates has as well, and we do too, is one of the key indicators of eradicating poverty is how much money is in circulation in a community. That's true whether it's in the United States, whether it's in poor communities have very little flow of cash and very little flow of money. Money is often flowing out of those communities, but very little coming back into the community. And so mobile money is being seen by Gates and many other foundations as a way to really increase cash flow and this transaction of cash, the movement of cash in a particular community. Because when you increase the movement of cash, there's actually an increase of wealth in that particular community as well. Even if it's the same money that's circulating. But increasing the circulation is increasing wealth. Go ahead.
So you said that you want to make sure that the agents that the people you're paying are going to have enough money.
Yeah.
So does that mean that the people you're paying are only able to go to one kiosk?
It depends where we are. So in Dar es Salaam, I mean, I have no idea how many of the kiosks survive because everybody is an M-Pesa agent for Vodacom, for Tigo, for Airtel, for every phone company, because everybody has developed a rival product now. But then the further away you get from the city and the more rural areas, you do end up having one or two agents for there. And so that's where we talk to Vodacom saying, well, there's business here, make sure your agent has enough cash. And because of the amount of money they're making, it's a it's an incentive for them to have the cash available. Right?
First mobile money. Can I, let's say like, I'm going to help us and pay my money through mobile. Can I also get cash from my own bank if I supply my bank information as well? I mean, if I don't have to go to the kiosk, I just go to my bank and say, I'm collecting money that's paid to me.
Via M-Pesa.
Yeah,
Some banks have made that arrangement, and if you have an account in the bank, you can actually just use you receive the money via M-Pesa and you immediately transfer it into your bank account without ever showing up in your bank. All the banks, all the key banks are looking at it saying, either we join this business or we're going to get cut out. I think in Kenya, you may be reading about reports from Kenya where many of the banks that were rich community banks are going out of business because M-Pesa is taken home.
Well, but interestingly enough, in Nigeria you can, and you can take it out of an ATM. So in the
Right.
Nigerian market, it's a little bit different because we've been looking into mobile money in Nigeria as well. So I think you can actually go to a teller. This is what I understand, but from limited.
Right.
So I think it differs also by country and by telecom provider and by bank.
One of the issues I also want to bring up is the ultimate thing is to be useful. Like I am personally being paid, right?
Right.
I can use for my own personal transaction, like paying the bills and everything. But the problem with Africa is that a significant amount of population, like almost, I don't know exactly, but like 6-7% deal with informal businesses. I mean, they get their goods and services from informal sector.
Yeah.
Right. So how can I apply the informal sector?
It's a great.
If I go to the local market right now,
Yeah.
the market woman, most of them are going to have to, they have to want real cash to give me the fish.
Not in Tanzania anymore. So that's where once you hit this takeoff point, things shift really, really fast because people see the speed with which they're receiving them. So in Dar es Salaam, it's changed completely. I can go to the market and make a payment using my mobile phone. I just ask for her number, saying, "Let me transfer money." You're right there. You actually witness that she received the money. You're done. And you've moved on. So I think that works well, but you need this takeoff point, because what we were also saying, people are never going to trust this system. And we've been amazed at how quickly they actually started trusting the system. And my proof of concept is often, it's a terrible anecdote, but when our 60-year-old deputy country rep is sending money to his mother in way rural Songea, using, to his 90-year-old mother, using mobile phone, M-Pesa, you know something is happening that's right, because his 90-year-old mom no longer waits for somebody to go on a bus and hand over the cash. She's receiving her cash every month using M-Pesa. So things are shifting. And he's my kind of, it's a terrible anecdote, but it works. You had a question now.
I mean, maybe this ties into the informal sector part of it, but I think, at least in Kenya, you don't have to register your phone as, like, through the government. In most countries, you have to register, like, with your passport. And I don't know if in Tanzania they have that.
So in Kenya you
infrastructure.
do too now.
You do? Oh,
Yeah.
that must
You have
be...
to use your ID card
Okay,
to register. All of us have moved to that because of fake phones.
right.
And boy, you need it. Tanzania doesn't have a national ID card and doesn't have enough passports to hang around. So you use your voter registration card to register. And we need it because we need to validate whether the transaction name coincides with the name of the provider that we have. What M-Pesa has done for us is they've given us free SIM cards, and they bring an agent with them, so we register people as fast as possible into the system.
Okay, so that would minimize, fraud or...
It does minimize fraud quite a bit, because we witness it and we say, okay, here's happening. Go ahead. I have a question for you guys, by the way, so I want to get to it.
I'm just wondering, what's the backup plan if something happens, either the receiver, the network worker, in
Yeah.
terms of phones, lost, damage, something happened there, and or in the simple.
The person whom you're trying to reach is currently unavailable.
Sorry.
Backup plan. All right, one of the things as a manager, because this was a new system, I've had to be absolutely clear. There is no backup plan. M-Pesa is it. Because you have a lot of people who are doubting. And you just have to have tremendous backbone. And the way we learned to do it later, after all our problems in Dar es Salaam, was first we made some payments to district officials. Okay, so if you're doing it in a place where this hasn't been introduced well, first pay your own staff, please. Because you've got to convince your team this works. The amount of resistance my finance director and I got from our team was unbelievable. Then the next people that we realized we had to overcome were district and national government staff. So when we had meetings with them, we would pay. We were in one key meeting where we paid and we told everybody that we're going to be paying electronically, either give us your bank account.